Good, good. All right. High energy. Clap. I like it. Yeah. Okay. I love it. We love high energy. Well, as Peter shared, I am Nicole Casperson. I'm the founder of FinTech is Femme, a media company dedicated to upholding our industry's promise of financial inclusivity by elevating the stories of women and diverse leaders. So basically, that means through my newsletter, podcasts, and events, I search for the stories of women and diverse leaders who are truly innovating in this space. Now, that's pretty easy to do with Shivani Saroya, with us here, the CEO and founder of Tala. She fundamentally has shown us that when we bet on women, we can unlock a better financial future for everyone and the whole world. So I'm excited to dive into your work and your story. Now, something I've been hearing a little bit lately is this narrative that it's easy to put diversity and inclusion on the back burner with the current market concerns and an increase and intense focus on profitability. Which is kind of funny, because if you've read my newsletter, you would know that a focus on diversity and inclusion is the pathway to profitability. In fact, if we focus on building global platforms for financial inclusion, we could add an additional $12 trillion of global GDP to our economy by 2025. But you'd be surprised how often that perspective is deemed aspirational. Shivani, you built a women-led team, a sustainable business model, a self-sustaining business model, and you've served 8 million people on 3 continents. Why are you able to grow when so many other companies are struggling in this market?
It's funny, I have multiple things to say as part of my answer. The first I'd actually say is focus. And I think if I think back to when we started, looked at the problem that we're solving. There's 2.5 billion people around the world that are currently locked out of the traditional financial system. Only 30% of the adult population worldwide is even in a credit bureau. And so I saw this as, one, a data problem, but ultimately I said, how do we get more purchasing power and credit into the hands of consumers and business owners that can actually create the economy, that can actually create profits for all of us. And we really stayed focused on that. We said the first thing that we need to prove is that credit scoring this population using alternative data is possible. And so for the last 7 years, that's what we've done. We've now delivered over $4 billion in credit access to those 8 million customers across 4 different countries: Kenya, the Philippines, Mexico, and India. And so ultimately, I had to first prove that the customer base is credit worthy, has purchasing power, that this alternative data can be used to create credit scores, but that it's good business as well. Along the way, as we proved that and stayed focused on that, we ended up actually creating an entirely unique proprietary platform to deliver financial services to the global underestimated. And so as a result of that, we developed our own competitive advantages. We now have one of the most interoperable payment systems across 3 continents. And it was because we stayed focused on the problem that we're solving that we ended up creating multiple different competitive advantages that we are now able to build off of. And so we are growing in this current macroeconomic environment because of the focus that we've had for the last 7 years. And so now we've moved beyond credit to now become a full financial account for our customers. And so I would say the reason that we're growing is because of focus, but then it's actually thinking about how do you take advantage of the opportunity and the time based on all the assets you've created. The last thing I would say is actually the thing that I think is the ethos of Tala, and we've talked a lot about, is this idea of belief and trust in people. And ultimately, I believe that this segment was one that had to be served. And so I saw a real market opportunity. And the fact that if we could unlock that purchasing power, it's good business for us and for the consumer. And so we built that relationship with them from the start. 2/3 of our customers tell us that they did not have access to these kinds of digital financial products before Tala. And And so it's a customer that's never been served. And so if you go out and actually prove value to them and trust them, they stay with you.
Crazy. Trust. Trust, what a concept. And I mean that trust is, as you said, it creates profitability, it creates growth, right? And that trust actually comes right back. I mean, what percentage of Tala customers repay their loans back?
So our global repayment rate is 92%, and that's across first and repeat loans. But 95% of our customers repeat with Tala. They stay with Tala. And now that we have more value for them, they continue to bring more of their financial lives into our ecosystem.
Right, giving the value right at the top, right? Instead of maybe trying to give some bells and whistles, which obviously this consumer base needs the back to fundamentals. They need the basic financial access. And in 2011, you started crafting this business to create those alternative metrics for credit scoring and determining if someone is credit worthy, which I just love because in this environment, we do as leaders have to stretch our minds and look at other metrics for success. So can you fill us in on how Tala calculates the credit worthiness with those different metrics for success?
Sure. So the way that we calculate the credit worthiness is using a wide variety of different data sources, but ultimately it all comes from the customer. And for us, we thought of it as this customer, again, doesn't have traditional data. It's not sitting in a bureau, it's not sitting in some sort of bank database, it's all in cash. 85% of the world is still using cash as a primary mechanism for credit. And so we really thought of it as, okay, how would we understand the customer? My background was in interviewing about 3,500 people across 9 different countries and emerging markets. And the way that I predicted risk was actually walking alongside them and seeing their daily lives. And so for me, it became, how do we use technology to replicate that? And so I'll give you an example in Mexico. We had a woman in Mexico. She lost her job during COVID. She moved back home with her family. So we lost that kind of predictability of employment. But instead, we thought about it as, is she still consistent with her bill payments? Is she still consistent in terms of her network? And how can we actually piece together her daily life using both behavioral data, patterns, and transactions to actually create a better kind of credit? And so what I would ultimately say is we're using, yes, mobile data provided by our customers, as well as behavioral data that we gather through the application and our interactions with them, to then piece together a daily life picture. And that's why I think we actually have been successful is we're able to use that data to provide the right offer at the right time. And so it's not a one-size-fits-all price, sizable, or even term.
And what I love about this strategy, this business model, is that it really does account for the messiness of the human experience. You get a much better picture of someone's capabilities, especially with access to capital, when you can actually see so many different data points of their life instead of just one or two, right? I mean, it just must have been like, you're changing lives with that, understanding.
Well, and I think we go in with this question of, instead of, how much data can I gain from your customers, we're actually asking ourselves, how much value can I give back to them for their data? It's their data, ultimately. Right. And what we were trying to do is co-create data and actually have that relationship with them in the future. So yes, our score isn't static. We bring in data for the first time of their application, but then by the value we provide to them, we continue to create more of that interaction data.
And it's that trust loop, right? And you curated a table of just diverse perspectives that have played such a critical role in helping you look at problems differently and the success you've seen. So, I mean, how has that just been the key to unlocking your sustainable business strategy?
I think it's been essential because it goes back to the problem.
Yeah.
And also in how we think about trust. Again, 85% of the world is cash-based. Only 30% of the world's adult population is in a credit bureau. The majority of emerging markets don't even have national ID systems. And so, for us, we we had to take a different approach to solve the problem. We had to say, okay, we're going to build KYC ourselves. We're going to build identity verification. We're going to build fraud models. We're going to build proprietary credit scoring models, first loans, repeat loans, behavioral models, network models, servicing models. We're going to build an interoperable payment layer. And I think because of having to take on each of those things, it all stemmed from how do we meet the customer where they are. And so it created essentially the force to have diversity at the table because we had multiple problems to solve along the way.
Well, I mean, you're building a lot, right? And in order to build for the most, some of the most diverse markets, you have to have that diversity sitting at the table to ensure that, blind spots are seen, to ensure, because all of us have them and none of us are perfect, And so I'd be curious, how did you kind of recognize or pinpoint when it's time to build for the problems that you see yourself?
I would say I think it goes back to focus, to say, in terms of timing, you do need to prove to yourself, to your team, to your investors that you solved the first part. You can't, we know that the problem that we're solving isn't just about credit access, right? It is about the fact that 2 billion people have been locked out of all of the traditional financial system. And so we knew eventually we wanted to become this full financial account, but we couldn't start there. And so we had to prove that the model could work in our first market, which was Kenya. And then from there we said, okay, people believe us a little bit, but now it's time to prove that we can go from Kenya to a completely different market. For us, that was the Philippines. And we had to prove that we could work in a cash-based economy where there's not really any mobile wallets, to be able to show we can work in a fragmented identity system. And so once we proved that, we said, okay, now where else can we go? And so I think timing is also about what are the proof points you're trying to show to yourself and I think to the ecosystem at any given time.
It's building incrementally, right? And being open to the long game. Because I think for a lot of folks in the industry, we're very do things fast and break things fast and disrupt it. We want to do that, but we have to do it with a level of intentionality and care, especially when we're talking about global financial inclusion. And this really does bring me to your leadership. There's so much about Shivani's story that is so admirable. So if you can, go read more about her and her personal story. But I think your belief in radical trust might be what I admire most. Can you tell us a little bit about that perspective from yourself in that leadership position and how you made it the cornerstone of college?
I think what the phrase that maybe always comes to mind when I think of radical trust, I think of it as, the best way to predict the future is to create it. And so for me, when I lived and worked in emerging markets, for almost 5 years, I saw that potential. And so it was that belief in the purchasing power and potential of this segment that kind of keeps me fueled, right? And it's ultimately what I believe is going to really make Tala successful, is the fact that we banked and decided to build uniquely for this segment. And nobody else has, right? And so in that sense, when I think about radical trust, it's going back to that question of, okay, what's the future we want to create? We want to create a future where we're in a place of saying yes more often. And so that goes to every piece of our technology and all of our decision making and all of the ways that we show up in the world is that when most banks say no, we're actually in a place to say yes. Because we're looking at a pool of a population and saying, instead of just thinking of it as how do we assess risk, we're thinking of it as how do we look at this population and actually create value. So we're saying, how can we give every single individual some value? And then from there, if you believe in that idea of everyone has value and everyone can actually generate value, then you're actually setting your business up for, to be a real generational business.
Right, and a self-sustaining business model, which I also am so, I admire that so much because back to that radical trust and that trust loop. You've really created a model that says, well, we're going to trust you, and it's on you to let us know that we can trust you back. And it's not just a one-way street where only the lendee has to trust the lender. The lender has to trust you too. And I think you really solidify that in the way that you launched in the Philippines. Want to tell us a little bit about just that story?
And I think, the Philippines story for us was really where we went from just being, I think, a B2C company and thinking of credit scoring and access to credit to really becoming a platform. Because we really did have to think about how do you build in such a way that you're meeting your customer where you are. To your point on, if you want to create that feedback loop, then you need an ecosystem approach to it. And you need an ability to, again, if they go to a remittance center to accept money, you need to be there. If they want to pay a bill somewhere else, you need to be there. Because you're ultimately giving them the power to protect their money, to use their money and grow their money. And so that requires you to take an approach, which is, how am I going to do the give and take, right? So if they're cashing in at a place, we're there. If they're cashing out and using the money, we're there. So that's what I would say is the Philippines approach for us was really having to rethink, how can this work every place in the world? Because most of the markets outside of the US actually look like the Philippines.
Right, well, and it was boots on the ground as well, right? Sending someone from the Tala team to go there, to walk every single day in the shoes of consumers in the Philippines. And I love that element because that's what it takes to have true empathy. We have this digital world where we feel more connected than ever before, but the reality is that's not how it is everywhere else in the world. The basic financial needs are still, not met, and not everyone has that access. And so, we talked about how traditional banking has failed to serve those that need help most. Tala's success is really built on that market gap. So what advice do you have for maybe other leaders out there or folks in the audience who are really looking to implement some of your radical trust philosophy?
I'd say two things. One is being proximate to the problem. And so, again, we wouldn't be where we are today across 4 different countries, 3 different continents, serving various different segments of the underserved without being intimately knowledgeable about the problem that we're solving and the customers and their aspirations. And so, to your point, we have, yes, global teams, but we have local teams. We have user researchers, product managers, engineers, actually in the same place as our customers. And so they're eating and breathing and living the same problems that our customers do. And I did that myself. And so I think that's where you need to have it within the team, but you need to have it in your leadership. And then the second thing I would say is, to your point on market gap, if you see an opportunity, it goes back to that same thing. The best way to predict the future is to create it. And so I would say don't sit on the sidelines and actually go after the problem and get as close to it as you can.
Right. Go and experience it. Have experiences in real life, not just on Twitter, all right, or LinkedIn. I think one of the last things I want to applaud you on really is your recent launch in the Philippines with the digital wallet, right? Tell us a little bit about that, because that just happened in April?
We have been working on it, but we launched in April. We now have over 500,000 account holders with us that are bringing their entire financial lives into the Tala ecosystem. And so it's exciting to see, that when you give value, it's not a hard sell to actually have people actually wanting to create more interaction with you. So we have Filipinos now saving with us, paying their bills through us, growing their money with us, and again, they are really saying Tala is the financial partner that we want.
I mean, that's just tremendous growth in such a short amount of time. I'm like, I blinked, and it's now, what is that, a month? Less than a month-ish, But anyways, my final question for you is, if we want to be the change that we wish to see in the world, what change do you wish to see in fintech, and how do you embody it?
I think the change I'd like to see is just, again, the momentum to continue. I think what we see, at least, and I would say this is more in the financial inclusion space, I would say that we are starting to see, I would say, the ability for us to actually create the financial system, right? But at this point, it is about us actually thinking about mutual value and thinking of it as, not a, hey, how do we just provide more choice? But it ultimately needs to come into this place of how do we put more power in consumer hands and give them access, and then from there, trust that they can navigate it. But I don't think we're moving the needle yet on that, and so we still see a lot of siloed approaches. So what I'd love to see is a lot more momentum and collaboration.
I agree. Well said. Shivani, thank you so much for joining me on this stage. Please join me in welcoming, or thank you, Shivani.